Hello again, and welcome from the deep into another episode of the Graveyard Shift with me, Book of Brett. Today we are going to be going over 2022's The Pale Blue Eye from Netflix. This is currently streaming on Netflix. I believe when I looked at the trending spot, it was number 4 as of this recording. It was number 2 when I set out to do this review. I know we're coming in a little late on this one, but life gets in the way and stuff happens. The Pale Blue Eye is a murder mystery thriller starring Christian Bale and Harry Melling. If you're not familiar with Harry Melling, he plays Dudley in the Harry Potter series. He was also involved with Buster Scruggs. He's in a skit on that. Actually, one of my favorite pieces from that film. If you haven't seen it, it's a great anthology movie by the Coen brothers. But we're not talking about Buster Scruggs today. We're talking about The Pale Blue Eye. The Pale Blue Eye finds Christian Bale playing Detective Landor, who has been summoned or hired by West Point for the U.S. military to discover a brutal killing that has taken place on the premises. He eventually meets up with Harry Melling, who plays Edgar Allan Poe, and together they set out to solve the murders and what's going on at West Point. Now, I have to say, I am a big Christian Bale fan. Ever since I saw Harry Melling in Buster Scruggs, I've become a bigger Harry Melling fan. I need to start diving into more of his work. He is a Shakespearean trained actor. It really comes across in Buster Scruggs, and I really feel like it comes across in this as well, because Harry Melling is the shining star of this movie. I know Christian Bale is technically the star, but I feel like Harry Melling outshines him in every single way. I have to say, I'm a big Christian Bale fan as well. However, I feel like this might be the weakest performance I've seen from Christian Bale. He's normally in outstanding movies. He's known for giving exemplary performances, but this just felt weak and off, and I don't know, something about it I just didn't like. The accent has something to do with it, and this is a common thing I saw in this movie, where these actors and actresses that are not American are doing American accents, and they all seem really poorly done. I mean, there are a lot of times where the accents from, I believe it's Tom Spaulding, plays the head officer, and then some of the other actors, there's a lot of foreign actors in this movie doing American accents, and even Christian Bale's accent feels really bad at times. Harry Melling decided to go with a more like Kentucky type of drawl, which I don't know if that was based on history. I went and looked up some stuff on Edgar Allan Poe. I couldn't find anything with him having like a specifically Kentucky accent, but he has been described from people that heard him when he was alive as having a drawl. So, maybe that's where he went that route, but Harry Melling really knocks it out of the park. He is a very, very good Edgar Allan Poe. He's very eccentric. He's very quirky. He's outlandish in certain ways, and he really knocks it out of the park. But I feel like he's the only one I can really say that about, and I feel like not knocking it out of the park can be applied to a lot of aspects of this movie. I was not impressed by this movie. It's slow to start with, and I don't mean it's slow to start. I mean the whole thing is slow. I feel like they were trying to give Harry Melling and Christian Bale like equal screen time, or trying to make them like both the star of the movie, but I feel by trying to do that, they made it very long. It feels very drawn out at times. The story, I gotta be honest, is not that compelling and interesting. I mean, the premise is very compelling and interesting. I'm a big fan of period pieces anyway. I'm also a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, and so I feel like those aspects of it are very interesting. For the most part, the way it plays out is just very bland, middle of the road. Nothing about it really like stood out as exceptional. And I know not everything has to be exceptional, but to me, I just wasn't interested in what was going on after the first like hour and a half. I will say this, I could watch an entire film of Harry Melling being Edgar Allan Poe. I could watch that. That was fantastic. Detective Landor does not give me this vibe of this amazing detective. One thing I did not say in the synopsis is Detective Landor has a lot of like past trauma. His wife died, his daughter disappeared, and he's currently in the midst of drowning himself in several bottles. But even then, even with that aspect of his character thrown in there, he doesn't feel like this brilliant detective, and maybe he's drunk all of that away, I guess. I mean, I suppose that's possible. I just didn't buy him as this amazing detective. Now, I don't want to just crap all over the film. I will say the cinematography is fantastic, and I know we say that a lot, and a lot of the times we're talking about the lighting, we're talking about the camera movements, we're talking about cinematography, the language of what you're seeing on film. Now, with that said, it does still look like most of what you're going to expect from Netflix. It's very, very high contrast, which is very, very common these days. However, it works well for a period piece where you are going to have a lot of contrast, especially when you're indoors. Most of your lighting sources are coming from candles and outdoors, and so there's going to be a lot of shadow, there's going to be a lot of contrast, but not just in the cinematography. The color grade as well is phenomenal in this movie, and it's got a very desaturated look. It really, really lends itself to the gothic Edgar Allan Poe style that they're clearly going for in this movie. I mean, I feel like the majority of this movie is aimed at being a Poe type story. Poe is credited with, creating or at least help fathering in the what we know as modern mysteries, murder mysteries. And so they clearly picked the genre of film. They picked the aesthetic. They clearly put more effort into his character than I feel like any other character in the movie. And I feel like what we have here is a Poe movie without enough Poe. I feel like we don't have enough Poe, but they really wanted it to be an Edgar Allan Poe movie. And I know somebody in the comments is going to make a comment on how many times I just said Poe right in a row. Most of the rest of this movie, though, feels very bland. It feels very unenergetic. The scene where Edgar Allan Poe comes in with the piece of paper and him and Landor. By the way, every time I'm saying Landor, I keep wanting to say Nandor from What We Do in the Shadows because it's such a unique name, both of them, that I keep misconstruing them. But we do have this scene where Edgar Allan Poe comes to Landor's cottage and shows him the piece of paper from the first murder, and they're trying to figure out what it says or what it could say. And this whole scene felt scripted. The conclusions they come to, the way they come to these conclusions, all felt very scripted. It felt very unrealistic. It felt very convenient. It does feel like they were handed a not terrible script, but definitely not something that you would expect in a movie of this caliber. Another example of that is the first climax of the movie. The first climax, and spoiler alert, big spoiler alert. I got through the majority of this without really doing any spoiler alerts. I tried. Spoiler alert. But the first climax where the ritual is taking place and Edgar Allan Poe almost dies and Landor comes in and saves the day. I can't remember. I believe her name is Leah. Ends up getting hit over the head because the building is on fire. And then her brother Artemis, while the building is collapsing around them, is just laying there holding her. And his death has got to be the lamest part of this movie. There's no reason for him to die. There's plenty of time for him to pull her out of the way. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. The other thing about this scene is it just felt very underwhelming. I don't feel like the energy that they meant to put across on the screen really came across at all. The whole thing just felt very underwhelming, and I was just really not, like I said, I just was not into most of this movie up until then, and the first climax does not draw me in anymore. It doesn't really explain away anything, and even the build up to it just felt kind of weak and diluted. Now, you may have noticed I said the first climax because there are actually two climaxes here. And if you did not check out on the first spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're going to go watch this movie, and do go watch the movie, We'll get into that in a minute. Do go watch the movie if you're so inclined. However, the second climax is the biggest spoiler alert. In the second climax, we find out that the soldiers have been dying because Detective Landor's daughter did not run away like he's been telling everybody throughout the movie, but what actually happened is that she killed herself after being sexually assaulted by 3 soldiers from West Point. And Edgar Allan Poe is the one that ends up confronting him about that. Now, I gotta say, this I did not see coming. However, again, the shining part of this climax is Harry Melling. Just the way he delivers lines. Sometimes the way he delivers no lines whatsoever. His nonverbal communication on screen is truly compelling. I really think Harry Melling might be one of the new shining stars that we see getting more and more work. And I really hope to see more work from Harry Melling because he is absolutely phenomenal. And the scene at the end of this second climax where he just stands there soaking in everything he's been told before walking out the door and him and Landor parting ways, it is beautiful. It really had a lot of potential, and there are a lot of scenes where Scott Cooper does amazingly in a directorial role. Scott Cooper was also the writer of A Pale Blue Eye, and I feel like this is a really good example of where his strengths really lie, and I really do think it belongs in the director's chair. Scott Cooper does an amazing job directing this movie. He actually really does. But I don't know, there's just parts of this movie that really fall flat. And I went into this wanting to love it. I wanted to love it. I'm a big Christian Bale fan, as I said, big Harry Melling fan, big fan of period pieces. I love period pieces. They're probably my favorite genre of film out there, whether they're epics, whether they're dramas, romances. I love period films, and I love them because of the way they're written. They're written differently. People speak differently. There's more of a theatrical poetry to period pieces. And I think that's the other reason why Harry Melling really captured my heart in this film, because the way he speaks, the way he gestures, his mannerisms are all very theatrical. It's very reminiscent of a bygone era, and that's why I like period pieces. So like I said, I went into this wanting to love it, and I came out very conflicted because, as I said, there are so many shining moments in this movie, but the pacing feels off at times. The energy feels completely wrong for certain scenes. Overall, it's a very middle of the road movie for me as far as energy, as far as interest, as far as pretty much overall. It was very middle of the road. I did not hate it. I absolutely adored aspects of it. So I would say definitely go watch The Pale Blue Eye. Keep your expectations in check. I went in with very high expectations, which may have been, part of why I ended up feeling the way that I felt. But overall, I would say that I'm going to go ahead and give The Pale Blue Eye a 5 out of 10. It's a very middle of the road rating for a very middle of the road experience. But with that said, guys, if you are enjoying the content that we're putting out, please hit that subscribe button. We've had a lot of new subscribers, and we appreciate each and every one of you. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. Every time we get a new subscriber, we text each other about how awesome it is that we got a new subscriber. Also, let me know what you thought of The Pale Blue Eye down in the comments. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was kind of middle of the road the way that I did? And what aspects of it did you like? What aspects did you think could be improved? Let's have a conversation. Let's even have a debate as long as it's constructive. I don't mind those. And of course, if you like this video, hit the like button. But until next time, I will see you guys later.